Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 19th Committee of the Whole meeting. I will call us to order at 6 o'clock. Um, Before we get started, I do want to make one amendment to our agenda. Kevin Lowry over at NEMCO is on deployment with the Coast Guard, and so he's unable to attend today. So I would entertain a motion to table item A in our discussion to a future meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Any discussion about that?
Just good on him for doing his service. We'll see him when he gets back.
Yep, agreed. So with that, I'll go with the any objections to adopting our agenda as amended? Any objections? Okay, the agenda is approved by unanimous consent. So now item 2 on our agenda is public comment. There's a blurb I should read. The committee is not accepting online public comments. This portion of the agenda is set aside for the public to address the council on agenda items or any other topics the council has purview over. The committee may not respond to comments from the public. If the comments are of a nature that the council does not have influence or control over, then the presiding officer, myself, since Deputy Mayor Fiorentani is on Zoom, may request the speaker to suspend their comments. Council or the committee may direct staff to follow up on any items brought up by the public. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. And thank you for the clipboard. And so looks like our first person is Alan Keith. So go ahead. You have about 3 minutes.
Thank you, committee. I'm speaking on the topic. Guard, I want to highlight the fact that our local elected officials, who you are, have a dual responsibility. Number one, to nurture the city government along, and number two, to reflect the needs and improve the quality of life of the 13,000 residents as you do your work. And I know you're aware of that. Since the budget was proposed, since the budget was adopted, and since the even the survey of residents, major economic headwinds have descended upon the local residents of our city that I think are relevant to your consideration. The economic landscape has changed, and Lake Forest Park residents face new and severe economic stress that will cause them to decline to adopt a 6-year tax increase. And therefore, I would suggest that the council not put one before them. Let's look at this. 3 different levels. First, the state level. In our state, just recently, the legislature adjourned after having adopted a $9.4 billion of tax increases on citizens of the state over the next 4 years. Locally, Microsoft has laid off 2,000 employees. Locally, Starbucks has laid off 612 Seattle corporate office employees. This is all new. At the national level, the new president was not present when this budget was adopted, has shown his ability to wipe out in a matter of weeks $6 trillion of stock market valuation. Since then, there's been a bit of a recovery, but we now have a president for the first time that is indulged in wiping out $6 billion of wealth. Wall Street analysts have changed their estimate of the likelihood of a recession, national recession this year. The 3 firms that I'm aware of, one has put it now at 40% likelihood, the other at 50% likelihood, and the other at 60% likelihood. Take your pick. We now have, for the first time, Moody's has for the first time dropped the credit rating of the government of the United States. That had never happened before. The value of the US dollar has now dropped 10% since you adopted this budget. At the local level, A new resident to Lake Forest Park, newly arrived, has bought if they have newly arrived, would have likely bought a house valued at $1 million and put a 30-year mortgage on that house. That is the median price of a house in the greater Seattle area. If they are starting a family since the start of this year, they would have looked at buying a baby stroller for $249. That same baby stroller from the same company will now cost that new family $399. And that kind of price increase is going across the boards. And so I hope it will be understandable to the council and to the mayor that this, as we just saw in the city of Briar, which turned down the option of taxing themselves for their city.
I apologize for the interruption. If you could finish up your comments,
Yeah.
please.
That these considerations be kept in mind as you conduct your deliberations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. And then next we have Jack Tonkin. Go ahead, you have the floor.
Earlier this year, I sent to council some scratch notes I made going through line items and it was a very quick effort to see what could be done if you just went through it quickly and what monies would be generated with it. And I had it over $1 million. Now, in thinking back, A, I did it too quick, and C, that's in that kind of environment, you can take a shot at it in many places, and then therefore the whole thing's contaminated. So I come to you tonight with two other ideas that I think are cleaner and easier to approve. And the need for it is, I think, critical. As Alan is talking about, everybody in the country is going to be faced with some different economic issues. And I'll give you these notes. This is not, I have to apologize, this is not a consultant job. This is a Jack Tonkin job. And I did print something out, highlighted, and did some handwork. So this is my apology that it's not a $100,000 consultant program that I'm giving you. But the two choices are, you can take all departments in the professional services column, and you come up with $1,740,000. That's what you're budgeting for your consultants. Then you take that number and you look at what it totals, 1727. And then you divide it by 500,000, which is where your debt is laying right now, I guess. So that's a 29% cut. So if you cut to use that money, that 29% to pay the debt off, and therefore no need for going out to the citizens and asking them to pay for the problem. And you still have $1.2 million. So $1.2 million is still a lot of money. Too much, in my opinion, but a lot of money to do what you want with consultants. The next option is where you go to all departments with exception of the public safety. I took the police and the public safety out of the issue. It's too sacred of an issue. It's too emotional of an issue. So I just eliminated that from this equation. What I did was I added up then all departments with that exception, and you got $26,617,000. So then what would it take to get $500,000 weaned out of that? The number is less than 2%. 2 cents on the dollar that your departments would have to find a way to deal with that. Now, I don't think there's too many department heads or too many people that are in there that would have too much trouble getting along, doing their job, no sacrifice of people or effort for 2 cents.
And if I could ask you to finish up your thoughts, please.
I'll finish it up just by distributing the.
Yep, yeah, by all means, if you bring it to us, we'll make sure all the council members get a copy of it. Okay, thank you. All right, there is nobody else in City Hall, so I will go ahead and close public comment. And now we will move on to item 3B in our agenda. This is Resolution 25-2018, authorizing the mayor to sign a professional services agreement with iWorQ Systems for community development permitting software services. And I believe Community Development Director Hoffman will be presenting this.
Thank you. Good evening. Community Development Director Mark Hoffman. This item was introduced on May 8th at the regular council meeting. This is the second touch tonight. And the summary is that the Community Development Department would like to switch permit tracking software for building permits, planning permits, right-of-way permits from Excella to iWorQ. Currently, we use a combination of Excella, Avocet, and Elevon to perform that function. We're requesting to sign a 3-year term contract with iWorQ for that same function. At the introduction, we presented that the primary reasons are that this is seen as suitable software for the type and the number of permits that we see. It's right sized in the sense that we're going digital and away from paper for a small town with limited staff, and there's a significant cost savings. One carryover question from the 8th we could address tonight. On page, I lost the page number, page 18 of the packet, the question was about data security. iWorQ responded after the meeting on the 8th, and without going into the terms they use, one of which is immutable, there's offsite storage, it's backed up daily, and there is no risk of it being held hostage. Within 24 hours of an event, we will be up and running again. And as a reminder, there is no connection between iWorQ software and any of the city drives. So what we are asking for on the 22nd is authorization for the mayor to sign the contract with iWorQ, and we would begin a 3-month process of putting the workflow in place, dumping the data into the new software, transitioning, and then learning how to use it for the future. All staff would be involved. And I'm available if you have any additional questions.
Hey, thank you for that presentation. I apologize. We are having a technical issue in City Hall. The screen that's in front of the three of us is not connecting. And so if we want to look at you, Director Hoffman, and everyone else on Zoom, at least Council Members Riddle and I need to turn around. But yes, so fellow council members, do any of you have questions for Director Hoffman? Councilmember Lebo.
Oh, thank you, Director Hoffman. I'm supportive of this, and I will vote to pass this. May we put in the resolution the term for the agreement and what you see as the dollar amount? As I read the resolution, I don't see either other than by reference, but it's not clear. So I would just ask that for administrative purposes that we add to the resolution the term of the agreement, and if there's any expectation to extend it beyond the 3 years, and the price for the agreement.
We could certainly do that for Thursday night.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Riddle.
So curious, this is right sized for us now. Do you have a sense of how long this size of a system will support us? And if you have any concerns of us outgrowing it at any time in the near future? I imagine not, but I figured I'd ask.
The current draft contract is a 3-year term, paid annually. I don't anticipate that the city of Lake Forest Park would ever outgrow that. There are changes in software over time. This is a better quality that I see, but a primarily residential built-out community, this should substantially work for anything that the community faces in the future.
Thank you very much.
Let me turn, I guess literally turn, and ask, do either of the council members on Zoom have any questions for Director Hoffman? It's fun turning and also keeping my face to the microphone. If not, I'll just say I concur. I think if it's your professional opinion that this software would be a better fit for the city and there would be cost savings, that's a win-win. So I'm also supportive of this. So yeah, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, let us move on to item C, continued discussion regarding current budget challenges. And I believe Deputy Mayor Furutani will be leading this discussion. Oh, that's Myrtle. Did you have it?
Are we close to getting the screen in front of us up? Would it appease the chair in lieu of if we were maybe to move to those seats so we could see the big screen behind us?
I think that would make the that would make the discussion more conducive. So if you just grant us a minute to relocate our chairs, and then Deputy Mayor Furutani can lead our discussion on the budget challenges.
All right. It will take me probably that long to get the screens shared that I want to.
All right, so yeah, I think this will be easier because that way we could see the PowerPoint as you're presenting. So uh, are you, Council Members Lebo, Riddle, are you both ready to go? Yep, so Deputy Mayor Furutani, please go ahead.
Great. Thanks very much for this opportunity to discuss our continuing budget issue in the city. We've been talking about it for some time. We have outlined the problem, I think, fairly sufficiently. This graph is a fairly good summary of that outline, where the blue and the yellow lines are the ones that we're looking at. And there's a sort of consistent gap between the blue line, which is the beginning balance, and the yellow line, which is the ending balance for each biennia. And you can kind of see both of them heading towards the gray line, which is our reserves. And the point is that we don't ever want it to actually hit the reserves. But if you extrapolate within the next few biennia, that will happen. And so we've outlined the many ways in which we've tried to make that intersection never occur. We've cut back nearly $500,000 in spending on the city side, and yet we're going to still have this persistent problem. I appreciate the comments that our public has just made regarding, trying to save on consultants. The problem is that the consultants, even though it seems like an extravagance on the part of the city, is not. As we saw from Director Hoffman's just recent presentation, they do things like run our permit services. We allows us to keep track of building, and in a sense, basically, we wouldn't be able to reap the benefits of having permits without basically having software like that. So it's a conundrum because a lot of the things that seem like are, extravagances are really not. They are core functions of our city. And so, what I want to share with you tonight, all of you, and I think you've gotten a paper copy, if I'm not terribly mistaken, or at least basically got my email about this, is a proposal that I have for a potential property tax levy. We do have to broach that topic because we need some other way to raise revenue. And so, I'm going to share with you on screen. And this may take me a second. Sorry about that. Uh, the actual proposal. There it is. Okay. Okay. So I think I can see it on screen there so you guys can see it. All right, great. All right. So as we mentioned in our survey that we sent out some time ago, and to which an extraordinarily large number of our residents responded, and I think everyone in the city realizes that we've got a fiscal problem, and we need to basically address this. And we don't want to address it by cutting services as much as we can, because a lot of the city core services are exactly that, they're core services. So the proposal on the table that I have here, and I am not wedded to this by any means, is let's do a calculation here. The top part shows that we have about 4.9 billion in total property valuation in Lake Forest Park. And one of the lower amounts that was mentioned on the survey was a 30 cent per thousand increase in levy rate. I made that 32 just because it makes the numbers work out a little bit better. I'm not wedded to the 32. But if you do that calculation, it's a fairly straightforward calculation. Um, it ends up generating about little over $1.5 million in revenue yearly. And the idea would be that this levy is indexed to inflation so that we can keep up with increasing costs, as many of us have to in our regular lives. All right, so what would this pay for? Well, what this would pay for are public safety and public works. So specifically, as outlined in our previous discussions, and it's on the city website discussing budget challenges, we've had a tremendous increase in the public safety 911 dispatch services cost. We've had a tremendous increase in jail costs. We've had tremendous increase in insurance costs. The top three line items there, essentially, if we didn't have them, we really couldn't run our police department. Similarly, um, patrol cars for police department. We were discussing that at our last business and finance meeting and past couple of actually regular business meetings as well. In our budget and finance fleet presentation, this is where this figure was pulled from, just literally for the next year. And then, of course, there's increase in public defender and prosecutor costs. And here's the big one. We are understaffed at the city in terms of our police services, and to the tune of 3 officer positions. And of course, it's not just the officers and their benefits; it's also the cost of their safety equipment, their training, and any insurance costs that we have for them as well. So that's basically that big chunk there. Furthermore, in terms of public works, then, I think during the pandemic, we all had the experience of going out to our parks as a respite from the real world and getting a little bit of green bathing in or whatever, but discovered that the parks, when they don't have workers, tend to get dirtier, tend to get a little bit more overgrown, and just are not as pleasant an experience as they could be. And so these seasonal parks maintenance workers really do a great job, especially during the summer, of keeping our parks looking tip top. Keeping all the trash picked up, keeping all the litter off the ground, making sure that basically overgrown areas aren't so overgrown. There's so many functions that they provide that just make for a much better park experience. So when you sum all these up, and all these numbers were taken, the last few were taken from the adopted budget that we passed last November. Uh, Total basically roughly the amount that I came up with at the top there. So as I said, basically I was trying to pay for all of these costs. So, and I look at these things that I put on here, and these are not nice to haves. These are we gotta haves. Otherwise, we're not really running a city. Yes, the voters in Breyer did turn down the levy increase there, but they're in dire straits as a result. I don't know what they're going to do about their public safety because they literally cannot cover the costs. So I don't want us to be in that situation. And I turn the floor back over to you, Mr. Presider.
Yep, thank you very much for the presentation. I will ask fellow council members, do any of you have questions, comments about what Deputy Mayor Furutani is proposing? Take Mayor.
Significant feedback here. Tracy, would you mind maybe turning down or muting yourself when see if that helps?
My apologies.
No, that's okay. And Ellen too, if anyone is not mute, I can't see from here too far. Just make sure everybody's muted. It may be local, but lots of feedback. So
I just unmuted myself. I wanted to comment on Deputy Mayor Furutani's presentation. Is now a good time?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, Deputy Mayor Fiorentani, I just wanted to thank you for putting this together. This is very valuable information, and I 100% agree with everything you're saying, and I highly support this, that this is something that needs to happen, that we need to push through if possible. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council members Lebo and Riddle, do either of you have, Councilmember Lebo?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Fiorentani. So you mentioned some of these, such as increasing jail costs, insurance costs, and dispatch costs. Were those costs not in our 2025, 2026 budget? My recollection was those costs were in those budgets, reflective of the increases that we had.
And I agree. Though I don't think we anticipated quite the magnitude of the cost. I'm going to defer to our city administrator here that in the second year of the biennium, do we expect the costs to continue to rise?
So first to Councilmember Lebo's question, yes, those were in the budget, part of the original $1.5 million deficit in the budget. Continue to increase at the rate they did? No, I don't think we would anticipate, especially 911 dispatch services. You'll remember that was having to change providers when Bothell could no longer provide that for the city. Jail and insurance costs, that's a crystal ball. I can probably get you a number, give you a history. I don't have that with me tonight of what we've seen year over year on percent increase.
But for the benefit of the public, all of these costs were included in our 25-26 budget.
Yes, they were.
So I don't want to leave folks with the impression that there are other costs that we didn't otherwise have in this spreadsheet that weren't included.
Correct.
The other is that how much of our reserves did we use for the 25-26 biennium? And this is the unallocated contingency.
Unallocated would be $1 million a year. It was 1.5. Council worked with the administration. We cut about $500,000 out of the budget.
So of the representation here of the $1.6 million, we in fact adopted a budget that used approximately $1 million to $2 million for that biennial budget.
Correct. This 1.5 looks at before those cuts were made.
And our current reserves at the end of the biennium in December of 2026, if we go back to the slide, was estimated at what?
Hang on, I'm going back to the slide. I'm going to stop sharing. It's well, the resolution of the graph is poor, but it looks like a shade over not quite 2.5 million.
I'm sorry, if you go back to the ending fund balance, it was in the neighborhood of 6 or 7 million.
Yeah, the ending balance was just under 6 million.
So we're going to represent, so our reserves is what, over $2 million?
Yes.
And that's our minimum reserve balance.
16%.
So what we're going to ask the public to do is, in essence, if we needed $1 million a year, is to increase our uncommitted contingency balance.
Yes.
So we're asking them to grow our uncommitted contingency balance, even though it's significantly above our reserve minimum.
You know, it is the rate of change, though, that concerns me. Is the fact that both of the ending fund balance is decreasing at a unsustainable rate, in my view.
I agree. I would suggest, though, that we're going to have a tough sell with the public to say we need to raise $1.5 million to increase our uncommitted contingency when we have a significant reserve. And reserve is not the right word. It's an uncommitted balance. public's gonna ask, why are you going out for a levy lift when you have an uncommitted balance that you could otherwise be using? Until you need to come to us and say, we've either exhausted our ability to balance our budget, and we're at a point where we need to make very hard decisions. We're gonna have to cut services, or we're gonna need a levy increase.
Right, and there's a lag time on these kinds of issues. So what I'm trying to anticipate is not having to have this discussion where we have to make split second practically for government decisions and then not play out the whole contingencies. I'd rather basically anticipate what's going to occur in a few years and be able to cushion that and do a more of a soft landing.
Okay, but if you bring up your chart, even a 6-year period out to the end of 2023, pardon me, 2030, we're still projecting to be well above our minimum reserves.
Let me bring that up. There it is. Right, as of like what is it, 2 biennia from now, we're still well above, but at the rate of descent by 2034, I'm guessing that the lines will cross.
So it would be interesting to understand why the citizens of Breyer did not pass a levy. But one of the things that when they advertised for the levy was that by 2029 or 2030, they would be essentially crossing that line where they would have a funding issue because they were using uncommitted balance today. It would be interesting to understand if the citizens just didn't want to do it or didn't think that the problem was imminent and therefore the city could address it between now and 2029.
I agree. That would be very interesting to find out. I wish they'd done a survey similar to ours.
I want to make sure other council members have an opportunity to speak. Councilmember Riddle, do you have any questions?
Just, yeah, just a quick clarifying question. So we have the 1.5 calculation here. Was that taking into consideration the cuts that we already did? Is that, or were you looking at just 2026 kind of at the end of 2026? Where's our delta still? Is that the 1.5 that we still have as a delta?
Yes, I mean, well,
Okay.
what I was looking at was not from even a delta point of view. I was looking at the costs that were literally in our budget and trying to project, what it would take, which are the pieces that basically um, are necessary to keep the functioning. Because as we've mentioned, we've trimmed as much as we think we can trim. Maybe, yeah, as one of our commenters said, there's another go around that we take a look at other departments. But honestly, from public safety and public works, I could not see anything. Then this is really where I got those numbers from. So, in this much as we already built in a structural deficit to the budget that we passed, yes.
So I think, when I'm looking at this and I'm looking at the graph, I can see the desire for us now to say, okay, it's easier for us to deal with the current discrepancy between the blue and the yellowy brown, depending on what screen you're looking at now versus as we get several biennium forward, they get further and further apart. The pain gets worse, if you will. I think structuring this idea of the levy as a one-time increase and then simply indexing it to the inflation after that. So we're not trying to continue to grab more and more and more revenue. We just want to make an alignment and hold the alignment for the next 6 years. There will be a discussion at the end of the 6 years of what do we do now, but it will at least put us into a place where there's some predictability over the next few biennium. Whether this is the right number or not, I think we can continue to have that discussion as a thought process of how we can approach the discrepancy between revenue and expenditures. I think this is an interesting idea of the one-time bump and then index it to the CPI. So I think that it's worth looking at. What that number is, I think there's continued discussion. If there's anything that can be trimmed, I think we did look at it all. But the community wants us to look at it again. I have no concerns looking at it again. I don't think we'll find anything drastically new, but new eyes, fresh eyes never hurts. But I would like to get a better understanding of what we've asked of finance director, Lindsay, thank you, in my head. What is the actual dollar kind of translate to the average house? So she did that calculations before for some other things. I think it would be useful to ask for a similar calculation. Like, what is the dollar? $40, 400, 4,000? Let's put something that's a tangible cost comparison to these numbers so that it's a little easier for us to understand the impact on individual households. Hearing from our community, we're all going to be tightening belts. We're all going to be feeling something over these next few years. But if we don't provide the services of a city, then we aren't doing our job. So we still have to do that. We have to maintain the roads. We have to sweep and, plow the roads. We have to provide our sewer, and we have to obviously provide police. And I just feel like we need to dig down to the numbers here a little bit more, but as a direction, I'd be interested in see what this direction takes us as far as how to structure a levy.
Yeah, and I appreciate your comment. And the fact is that one of the reasons to address Councilmember Lebo's point, I like this as being 6 years limited, because it does mean that if we, somehow get lucky and the yellow never approaches the gray, then the 6 years from now, council can decide, well, maybe we don't need this levy anymore. Maybe we can take it off. That's my fervent hope. And I think basically, yeah, the idea here is that we just need to tune this so that you're right. I appreciate the commenters earlier. There's going to be some hard financial times ahead. I'm cognizant of that. Hits me too. And the fact is that I want to tailor this so it doesn't harm our residents unduly, and yet, as you said, it pays for the services that are absolutely critical to the vital function of the city.
Okay, thank you. I see that both the mayor and city administrator had their hands up.
Further.
Sorry, Councilmember Saunders, did you have anything else you wanted to say? You're muted, so I can't hear you.
Thank you. No, I have no other questions or comments. Thank you.
Okay. I have a few comments myself, but I'll defer to the city administrator and mayor for my comments.
Just to Councilmember Riddle's point, just did some quick math based off of earlier. It was mentioned $1 million is the average price of the home in Seattle area. That'd be $320 a year to that homeowner. At the 32 cents the deputy mayor proposed.
Mayor French?
Thank you.
Is the mayor speaking?
Oh, my apologies. I'm sorry. Let me back up there for a second, Deputy Mayor and Councilmember Saunders, my apologies. When I came onto the council in 2012, the city was in deep financial straits. We, several of us championed for increased levels of reserves and efficiencies and making sure that we were in a very sustainable place. This is not a one-time program. This is not a project. This is people's lives. And I'm not talking about just city staff. I'm talking about this community. Our responsibility is to this community. And when I look at levels of reserves that we are right now, are we in a place, and I've said this a number of times before, are we in a place where it is dire straits, where we have to dig into those reserves? Or are we going to look at other alternatives when the community is considerate of what the levels of service that they would like to see, what we're looking for. And I don't see us on a cliff right now when it comes to dipping into those reserves. I wait for a cliff because we have been at a cliff before in this community. And I think it's very important for everyone to understand that those levels of reserves are for those dire emergencies. When you have a situation with your own household that you are, have an emergency, you decide what is that dire emergency. And I think this community knows pretty well what the dire emergency is. That is when we cannot fund core services. We are at the place right now where we are about as lean as we possibly can get. When the comments come in about consulting services, I know that's a great place to go. But at the same time, our staff is at such a lean level, we cannot continue with staffing the police department at the current HR levels that we need. We do not have the resources to do that. We have other projects that absolutely have to continue forward. And I'd far rather say to the community, let's have a conversation about what you would like to continue to see for levels of service, rather than dipping into reserves and saying, we're going to continue to bump along here at a place where the cliff is going to come. No matter what anyone says, it will come at some point. And I think it's really imperative for us to realize that the 16% and above level of reserves is a very responsible place to stay for a real emergent situation. I don't believe we're at an emergent situation. This is the place where we have a very robust community conversation. And we say to the community, if you want to continue these levels of services and increase accessibility and other things that are necessary for the levels of service you expect, which they said in the survey, then we have to consider something different.
Thank you for your comments. I'll offer a few of my own, and then we can go around for a second round of council member comments. Looking at that graph, you don't have to put it up again. The further in advance we slow the rate of descent, the stronger we will be as a city. And so even if we may not get it to a completely horizontal line, but if we can at least get it to maybe only a couple of 100,000 decrease a year rather than 1 million, that will give us more time to develop a properly sustainable budget. I have concerns that looking at this table of annual costs, I think some of these are going to increase substantially. For instance, prosecutor and public defender costs. The Washington Supreme Court is in the process of potentially changing levels of service for public defenders. If we need to hire an additional public defender, that would be a substantial increase over our current expenses. Likewise, if we need an additional prosecutor to handle traffic camera volumes. Or if, let's say, our current jail agreement with Sunnyside, if they decide to get out of the jail business, and then our next option is substantially more expensive, as has happened with Norcom for dispatch. So I'm concerned that I don't think these numbers are going to stay the same. And we'll have other increases. I agree with Councilmember Riddle. I'd like to see, we'll have deliberations about what the proper number is. For instance, my initial thought, I'm not sure parks should be here. I think public safety was by far the top item for the community in the survey. I think it would be a cleaner levy lid lift if we can say this is just for public safety items, and then we can decide which public safety items are in it. So I would like to see us focused. Also, I looked up the numbers. From Prop 1 from 4 years ago, that was just under 60 cents per $1,000, at least in 2021 money, which I think is about 70 cents per 100,000, 70 cents per $1,000 in 25 money. So as presented, this would be roughly half the scale of Prop 1 from 4 years ago, to give us a sense. But yeah, I do think we can dial in and see what's the appropriate level. Is it this level? Is it half of that? But I do think it's important that we slow the rate of descent of what far we're eating into our unallocated general fund. And with that, I will open it up for another round if there's any other council members who have additional questions or comments.
Yeah, and I think to reiterate, I think the one thing that can be confusing sometimes is understanding that this is really a general fund operations constraint that we're facing. We may not be facing a similar sort of budgeting issue, not necessarily because of our traffic cameras that have brought in some additional revenue, but those are locked in for other uses. So I think as we approach the community, I think we need to be very clear that this is a unique piece of our budget that is facing this constraints where other pieces of budget may not have as urgent of a need or have the same type of issues. This is something that I think we have to think about as we're presenting the numbers, you know, focusing it on the general fund. This is where our problem is. This is what we're going to target to fix, and maybe being very clear with our community about that. Just so that, again, it's that sort of the education clarity part. So as we see these numbers, I just want us to remember, like, let's just keep ourselves focused. This is general fund. This is a general fund issue. This is a general fund revenue request.
Thank you. Councilmember Lebo, did you have any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I didn't bring my, apologize, I didn't bring my adopted budget, but my recollection is that the 1% increase that we did for our property tax generates about $34,000 a year. So our total taxes on property tax was about what, $3.45 million per year.
I'll look that up real quick.
So I'm just wondering about the amount of this in relationship to how much we actually get for property tax. The other is, I thought I read that the state adopted budget did allow cities to increase their sales tax by 0.1% for public defenders if the city so adopted.
It's for police services.
So there is an option that cities could adopt 0.1%.
There is, and we're waiting to hear from AWC what they think that might generate. And I'll pull that number for you.
But it would generate 0.1% of our.
Yeah, our sales and use tax is 3.5 million for the biennium. So 0.1% of that's quite a small number. There may be some nuances that I'm not thinking through. Property tax for the biennium is just over 7 million, so about $3.5 million per year property tax.
So this would be roughly about a 40% increase in the amount that the citizens would pay for the portion that would be Lake Forest Park.
We have to remember that also brings into account commercial tax base as well. So we'd have to do some math, figure out what that percentage increase is to residents of the city.
Okay, thank you. I want to continue going around the horn. Councilmember Saunders, did you have any other feedback? Nope. Councilmember or Deputy Mayor Furutani, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I appreciate everybody hearing me out, and I've been writing down your comments, my notes, and basically trying to address those issues as time goes on. So this is not the last discussion, of course, that we're going to have on this.
All right. I think I saw Councilmember Riddle, you had your hand.
And I think the one other element to this is as we have this discussion with our community, whether we want to go in this direction or how much, is really understanding what happens at the end of the 6 years. And so that there's a clarity as to what that does. It basically reintroduces our cliff. It puts it right back into effect. So having an understanding with our community, what to expect if we were to propose a 6-year levy, and what they should be prepared for towards the end of the 6 years. So just again, that education piece and making sure that we're very clear with all the implications of a request of this nature.
All right. Going around the horn, any other council members would like to offer? Councilmember Lebo.
I would just come back to, I think we're premature to go out for a levy lift this fall. If the purpose is for public safety, when we're not talking about dipping into our reserves, we're talking about using built up unallocated contingency. And I think that the citizens of Lake Forest Park would understand that if we're asking for money when we already have a healthy balance, well above our reserves. We're not talking about dipping into our reserves. We're talking about built up unallocated contingencies. And that's what we used in this current biennium. So I think we're premature to go out for a levy lift this fall.
All right. Oh, I see Councilmember Good has just joined us. Welcome. Not sure if you've been able to hear the conversation, but you are welcome if you have any questions or comments regarding the budget or the proposed levy lift. I'm happy for you to join the conversation.
Yes. I am also concerned with a lot of the costs that many people in the community are experiencing right now, as far as everything is unpredictable right now. And so doing a levy lid lift right now is, well, I think it's warranted in the long term. I am not sure if it is warranted in the short term, because there's so much unpredictability right now with markets, cost of goods, just everything that's going on in everybody's lives, that I'm not sure if it's the right time yet.
Thank you for your comments. Thanks, continuing around, anybody else with any last comments, questions, thoughts? Councilmember Riddle.
So I think one of the things that looking at our unallocated funds versus reserve, I think it's a really important piece to know. I think the question is, how long do we wait if we were to wait? And what happens then if the community still isn't ready? What if they say, well, you've waited 4 years, it can't be that bad. And then they do not approve. And now don't have a buffer till we get to our reserve. So I think, again, there has to be a deeper conversation. I think this was a great start to it. Is this the right time? What happens if we wait? What happens if we wait and it fails? Are we in Breyer's position where we can't make payments? The other piece to this is understanding that our most important asset here at the city is our people. And things like salaries, benefits, the insurance that goes along with all of that. That is something that will continue to increase, not only because, that's just the trajectory. We want to have a city where we are paying our people appropriately. We want to reward the hard work that they do. And so what concerns me is, because this is an operations fund question, those that will suffer if we mismanage this is going to be the people. It's not going to be less things we purchase from outside. It's not going to, less services means we are going to employ less people, more than likely. And we can't predict what is going to happen with police salaries in the future, but we can assume that they will go up. And we want good police officers. And so a lot of these are tied together. And again, I'm not saying that there's a clear answer right now, but when we say loss of services, it's loss of people who have worked here for a long time, have institutional knowledge, that we may be losing those folks if we wait too long and then a potential levy in the future fails. So I just want us to be aware it's a balancing game, and we're going to have this conversation here for some time before we have to make a decision. But that's my fear about waiting too long.
Thank you. I see Councilmember Good and Saunders. So we'll start with Councilmember Good with your hand up.
My crazy little audio button. I agree with Councilmember Riddle on, we need to take care of our people. However, if there is, there's going to be a vanishing point, I would say, of where we have some available money in our fund that Councilmember Lebo just talked about. And so I think more thought needs to go into, and let me lower my hand there. I think more thought needs to go into how long would that money sustain us without a levy lid lift. And I'm not saying that we don't start talking about one. I'm not saying that at all. And I think that disclosure to our citizens is critically important so that they understand what we're doing. But they're going to want to know, what are we needing the money for? And if we say it's for, if we say the wrong thing, it's going to turn them off. So that I'm thinking that we have to be very reasoned and careful about what messaging we're providing to our residents. And especially if they know we have some money somewhere that we're not tapping into. They're going to ask the question, why aren't you using that? You know, why? So I'm suggesting that we discuss what is happening with our community so that there's transparency and they know where that we're doing as much as we can not to impose higher cost on them.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. And then Councilmember Saunders.
Yes, thank you. I think we all raise very valid points, and we all seem to be kind of aligned with one another with a little variables there. What I'm worried about is if we pull from our reserves, then we run into that problem of maybe depleting that and then not having enough money to pay what our city officials or city employees are worth. And we already have lost people because we can't afford to pay them or keep up with the demand of the going wage. So I would just hate to see us lose more people because other cities are able to pay them more. On point to what Councilmember Good said, I agree. I feel like we should reach out to the community and just be really transparent with the citizens of Lake Forest Park, so they know exactly where what we would be doing with that money. Deputy Mayor, you did post earlier at the beginning of your presentation. I'm wondering if that's possible to pull that back up again. Your slide that had the breakdown.
My apologies. I've got to find it here.
Okay.
Too many open windows. There it is. Okay. Oops, that's the wrong one, isn't it?
Yeah, it was the one that was itemized.
Yeah. Me. There it is. That one.
Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
And now I think I can see it.
Do you want me to make it bigger? I can make it bigger.
If you could, it's pretty small on my screen.
Is that big enough?
Yes, I believe I can see that a little better now.
Did you want to see the?
So is this something we could somehow not distribute to the community, but at least have a conversation with the citizens?
I believe it's posted on our website now, right? Because it is a
Okay.
public document.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll stop sharing.
All right, and then I think Councilmember Good has her hand up, and then I see the mayor. We'll go to the mayor after. So Councilmember Good.
Again, here I am. So I'm wondering, is there any way to determine how long our float is? I guess that's what I would call it, a float as to, I mean, obviously, you know, we do need more money. We do have money in reserves. So when do we reach that critical point? Do we have a duration on that? And if we don't have that, could we do that?
Yes, in fact, Finance Director Vaughn is working on that as we speak. So hopefully at the next time we talk about this, we'll have that information.
And just to add on to that, I suspect, the first approximation would be to take the graph and just extrapolate, assume the lines continue moving at the same linear rate. And then when would the brown and the gray lines cross? That assumes that our expenses are sort of constant. But then Finance Director Vaughn might have more perspective on whether she sees escalating costs or de-escalating costs and how that would change the time frame for the lines to cross. Councilmember Saunders.
Thank you. I forgot to mention or ask if there's a way that we can put an exception in there for the people who would be exempt from this, like low income or senior citizens, disabled people, people who, is there a way we can make them exempt from that contributing to the levy?
Yeah, I don't think this would affect the exemptions that already exist. So
Okay,
those folks who basically qualify for those,
they would still qualify.
yeah, we would still, and we would still tell them that they qualify when we can.
Great, thank you.
And perhaps City Administrator Hill could confirm, but that's my understanding as well, that this would just add to your property tax bill. And so if someone has a low-income senior 50% property tax exemption, it would just be 50% of the new amount. But Administrator Hill, could you comment?
I won't comment to the dollar amount because I don't know for sure, but it does apply. And we did this in the last levy. We did note that the senior disabled discount, et cetera, would still apply to the rate in Lake Forest Park.
Thank you. At this point, I think I'll take one last call. Any other council members have comments? And if not, then I will allow the mayor to offer his. So, council members, any, Councilmember Riddle?
I've been noodling and doodling. One of the things that I'm hearing repeated is we do have unallocated funds. And the question of if we were to hold that same amount of unallocated funds and ask for additional funding to keep us, is that something that the community would entertain? It's a great question. Would it be something worth us thinking about as structuring the levy such that the first 2 or 3 years are a ramp up to the amount that we need? So essentially we're balancing a little bit of the unallocated funds and an increase and then until we kind of get to that sort of balanced zone where we know then we can move forward tied to CPI. It's just a different thought. It's sort of balancing some of the concerns of my colleagues of why I would be asking for a full coverage of our deficit if we still have unallocated funds in addition to our reserves. So I would like us to maybe noodle on that with Director Vaughn a little bit. Is there possibly a ramp up balanced approach that we could present to the community that would take a lot more detailed look into to see what that would look like? But to kind of address some of the valid concerns of my colleagues, maybe that'd be worth looking into.
Thank you. And now with that, I will turn to the mayor. Do you have any comment? I saw your hand up.
Thank you. I have my outside voice going on here, but I want my friends out there on the internet to be able to hear us. A couple of things. Councilmember, your point is well taken. I don't believe that's allowed under state law. It has to be a static kind of situation. So, but we can certainly look into that. The other thing I just wanted to remind everybody that this is what we're looking at here and what Deputy Mayor Furtani put in front of you all is this is the new reality. This is foundational. Those costs are not going to go lower. They're only going to increase with inflation and other pressures based upon regional issues and national issues. And I would offer that you can decide whether or not the timing is correct, but at some point this decision is going to have to be made. And one of the things that you've all heard me say ad nauseum is to look beyond terms and look way beyond any of our seats here on the council and thinking about, do you really want to have a situation where in 3 years, potentially, if this rate of growth in terms of pressures on our community and the needs of preserving core services grows, that we're faced with this in a very different situation. Right now, I believe, while there is uncertainty, one thing is immutable. These costs are not going to go down. So as a risk-averse person, I look at this and I say to myself, I'd rather have money in reserves for a place where this community is really seriously in a very dire situation versus, and there's a balance, versus drawing them down to the point where we got to in 2008 and 2009, where we were literally at the precipice of having a question of whether the community would survive. That is not the situation here. But my fervent hope is that we will never, as elected officials, push an agenda that pushes us into that position ever, ever again.
Thank you for that perspective. Any last closing thoughts from anyone? Councilmember Lebo.
So Mayor French, my recollection was that when we were in that dire straits, that it was a matter of decreasing expenditures and not increasing revenue because Prop 1 failed. Is that correct?
There were several issues there, John. One of the issues was the lack of specificity to the levy, first of all. The second issue was there were a number of positions that unquestionably were optional. And the community spoke during that levy process to say those positions were not something that were part of considered core services. So I would say, I can say from the standpoint of human resources right now, we don't have enough staffing to even take care of what we need to fill the 4 police vacancies that we have not coming down the pike, but are present as of now. So I think that's, again, if somebody, I've listened very carefully, and I know you all have too, to the community members who have said that we can decrease core services. But at the same time, I'm not really seeing concrete examples of where that is an option. And additionally, to Councilmember Riddle's point, the question is, we have a very, very competitive landscape right now when it comes to staff. We have there is poaching going on. We're losing staff, and it's very expensive to hire someone. It's far less expensive to recruit, retain, and make sure that those individuals are paid a fair commensurate wage with the region.
Thank you for that. But at the time that we had this dire issue, the citizens said no new taxes, and the city resolved its financial situation. Was that correct?
That is correct, through staffing cuts.
Yeah.
Massive cuts. As a matter of fact, there was not just furloughs, there were actual eliminations of a number of positions.
But that did reflect what the citizens said that they wanted to do, based upon either raise taxes or cut staff, essentially.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilmember Good.
Hate to keep chiming in on this, but so I agree with what Mayor French said about, that staffing is very important. However, have we looked at our reserves to help fill any of those gaps? And if we do have to propose a levy lid lift, being transparent to our community might be a way of a little bit more, because that's what I've heard from people, is that while we might need money and they understand it, but they don't really understand what it's all for. And so I'm suggesting that we do more outreach to the community, possibly in the interim, use more of the reserves to maintain the staff that's necessary, and then craft a plan to move forward with, if we are going to require a levy lid lift, and to be very clear about what it's for and be very detailed with it so that the public will understand. Because I think the last time I'm relatively new here, so I'm only hearing feedback from people, but they didn't really see what it was all for. So I think that there's a communication thing that we need to improve upon with our community, and then we can see what's up.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Furutani.
I wholeheartedly agree with Councilmember Good. You know, one of the reasons I developed this one pager is to literally basically give you all something to talk about when people approach you about this idea. I've done my breakdown of the things, and if it needs to go into more detail, I'm happy to do that. So let me know how basically, you know, there's basically drowning with detail and then not having enough, right? So I want to hit that sweet spot where we don't bore people to death, but provide them with enough substance that they can actually make a decision. So let me know basically how I need to change those categories, and I'll see if I can find the numbers because I have a much more detailed breakdown. I just chose not to put it on that one pager.
Thank you. Any last comments from anybody? Councilmember Riddle.
I just want to acknowledge this is going to be a difficult task for us to wrap our heads around what we believe is the best approach to come to the community. But I think we all agree it's going to be driven by what the community is telling us they want and need. And that engagement with the community is going to be the biggest piece of how do we determine what the community wants and then providing them with an option that they've asked for. So I look forward to our discussions as a body, but also truly having a very detailed discussion and interaction with our community over the next couple months, few months to really understand how what they want from us at this time and whether it's this time or another time.
All right, not seeing any more hands. Thank you for the very robust discussion. I think it's true to how our city council's operated. This has been a very collegial discussion, even when they're having disagreements. So I look forward to us continuing this discussion in a respectful, collegial way where we can engage with the community on this. So it's going to be a hard conversation, but I'm looking forward to being able to have the conversation. With that, let us move on to item D, setting upcoming council meeting dates. My understanding is that this is in regards to middle housing and potentially adding additional meetings in June to make sure that we can pass the middle housing ordinance by the June 30th deadline. And judging by the fact that Director Hoffman is on video again, I suspect that I am right.
Correct. Thank you again, Mark Hoffman. The preparation for this has now taken place, and we are leading towards an introduction by me this Thursday night at the regular city council meeting. The Commerce 60-day required review is over. We received their comments early. Those are now amended or revised into the Planning Commission draft. The SEPA review and appeal period ends June 2nd. The public hearing at Planning Commission was held May 13th. That night, they made a formal recommendation to the city council. So the discussion tonight at Committee of the Whole is essentially how many opportunities or which opportunities the city council would like to queue up between the May 22nd meeting introduction and June 30th. The reason being on July 1st, if the city has not enacted local regulations, the adopted Department of Commerce model ordinance for middle housing takes effect. So it'll be a busy month. This discussion item is what opportunities or dates or meetings do we already have on the agenda, and which ones would you like to add?
All right, and Deputy Mayor Furutani, did you want to kind of lead the logistical discussion on this one?
Sure, absolutely. So I've got some dates here. Director Hoffman, please correct me if I'm wrong on any of these. The idea is that we need to hold a public hearing, and our next after the meeting on the 22nd, I believe is June 12th is the next council meeting. So if we choose to hold the public hearing then, we'll basically need to approve the model, or not the model, the code amendments that our planning commission has recommended and our comments incorporated on the 26th of June. So those are, of course, two previously scheduled meetings. Now, I think the 12th might be fairly busy then. I don't think basically there's going to be a, unless we choose to go over time, of course, a huge amount of time to basically have a lot of comments. So the purpose of scheduling another meeting would be so that all of you would have had a chance to look over the proposed code amendments, which will be available as of May 22nd, as the director mentioned. And we'll basically see, there's a couple of other possibilities. Again, June 19th is a business and finance meeting. And I don't, again, Chair Lebo, I don't know how busy that one's going to be, but if we could piggyback as we did on the previous one, I keep hating to impose on you, but I know it's a night that people have more or less free, so which is why I'm picking on it. And then, if need be, June 30th is a Monday, and that's the last possible time we could have a special meeting that we could, in fact, approve the code amendments. So those are the two other dates I'm looking at. I'd be happy to open to anybody else who has an idea of when other meetings could be, and just get. I think there's 80 pages worth of document, something like that.
There's extensive reading that's been on the webpage that's background for all the House bills, 3 years of legislation that's been up for the year. The document itself is about 80, 85 pages. Most of that does not change, but there are a lot of amendments to the specific chapters and sections. So while they all relate to middle housing mandates and accessory dwelling units, it's throughout those 5 sections of code. So it is quite a bit of reading.
Right.
Two topics.
So I didn't want to schedule it too early before people had a real good chance to look at it.
Councilmember Riddle has her hand up, but before, I would just point out June 19th is Juneteenth, a holiday. So June 19th is not available at all. But Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you for that reminder. When we look at this documentation, Director Hoffman, are we going to be seeing like the complete section with the red lines, or is it going to be kind of just the pieces that are being adjusted? I think because this is covering, housing and ADU, I would recommend that we maybe have a full red line of the whole section, just so that we can create context and not have to flip back and forth like in the webpage. What were you proposing to present to us?
I was hoping to
format?
receive today one document that is redlined, the existing code sections, and that is why it's so lengthy. It has everything that's not changing. Striking the underlined form in red, and even so, there are a lot of amendments.
And then I know the community is going to be interested in what does this really mean as far as, what is the possibilities that could come out of these codes? How do you feel like approaching responding to that potential request? What's the worst case scenario, best case scenario that can come out of these changes?
Well, they're required mandates. 3, 4, 5 primary House bills in the last 3 sessions. We had a lengthy discussion over the last year and a half at various levels. Last year, the policy portions were captured in the new adoption of the comprehensive plan. We received another grant from Commerce to do the development amendments, and those are due 6 months after the comprehensive plan. So these are the actual amendments that are implemented on property, on projects. So the conversation's been going on for a long time. 2 to 3 months ago, it spawned a lot of side issues, very important issues. The focus of the Planning Commission then needed to be measured. The consensus was, let's focus on the minimum mandates to meet what is required of a city of Lake Forest Park size, but have a parking lot or listing of additional issues that are of interest, affordable housing tools. So this then went forward with just what is needed to meet the minimum mandates from Olympia for a Tier 3 city. These amendments do that for primarily accessory dwelling units and middle housing. The primary shift is we don't use the term single family anymore. It's low density residential. And a lot of those definitions are incorporated in. The biggest change in these amendments as it applies to property is you no longer are limited to one primary dwelling unit and one accessory dwelling unit permitted by right. The options that are captured in these amendments are two scenarios. One, you could have two primary dwelling units or a duplex by definition, or you could have one primary dwelling unit and two accessory dwelling units, and then a variety of changes in regard to ownership, occupancy, and so forth. So those are the primary focus of these amendments, and very different than Shoreline or Bellevue, Seattle. Those are much bigger jurisdictions, more significant types of middle housing. So ours is primarily a shift from what used to be called one single family primary dwelling unit to now two primary dwelling units, also known as duplex. Now, the important thing to remember, two things to remember. We approach this as no matter what the mandates are, they should not affect our critical areas ordinance or our tree regulations. So we achieve that. But you can still, to whatever extent your site or lot or property is developable, develop in accordance with that without disturbing critical areas and the trees. Oh, and that made me forget the other one. Oh, the standard development regulations have not changed. Bulk, mass, height, setbacks. And what this is allowing duplex development on low density residential at the same maximum bulk regulations as are already in place. So what you end up with is 2 units of a bulk and mass that used to be allowed for 1. And all this is at market rate. So you'll hear me repeat a lot of this on Thursday. All this is at market rate. These are not deed restricted. These are not affordable housing per se that you hear about in a lot of the legislation. But the intent is to provide a diversity or mix of housing types and sizes at market rates, and thereby have a positive effect for that missing middle housing type. So that summarizes Lake Forest Park.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Councilmember Saunders.
Was I next? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm trying to remember. Deputy Mayor Furutani, is this a good time for you to hear if we have any conflicts for the special meetings that we need to schedule for June?
That is the purpose of the section, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. So I'm hopefully going to be able to zoom in from afar, but I'll be in Europe from June 18th through July 3rd. And with the 9-hour time difference, I don't know how likely and we'll be traveling on trains. So I'm not sure, not that you have to plan it around me by any means, but I just wanted to let you know that I'll have that conflict.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, Councilmember Good.
Okay, 2 things. I will also be out of town from June 14th till June 23rd or 4th, but I will only be 3 hours difference, so I will make myself available. And then the other thing that I wanted to bring up with this middle housing, I was wondering if the planning department has kept track of the permits that have been submitted, for example, since January, and what types of permits they are for any sort of new structures, so that we could get a handle on what has been done to date as far as, what type of structures are people building or doing? Are they doing ADUs? How many ADUs? Because we are a small city, so based on our size, it's a good idea to understand a number of units that we need to have in order to achieve the goals set forth for us. So for example, if we need so many ADUs or so many middle housing, how many units is that? So that we can determine how our performance is being measured. And that's my question.
I can respond to it now in two ways. The number is 870. That was incorporated in the comprehensive plan. That's our growth target. It represents approximately 200 and something units beyond just normal growth rate or infill. All of it's infill. We anticipate by policy, these middle housing and accessory dwelling unit regulations will get us to that growth target without a huge growth pattern being created. We don't know how many we're going to get. We anticipate that it's not going to be significant. It'll be more than we have now. Part two is, no, we don't have exact numbers. We've been without a building official since October 1st. We've been without a permit coordinator for much of that time, especially since February. We had a new permit coordinator who was fantastic for 4 weeks. Friday was his last day. We've been challenged with triage and just getting reviews done and getting permits out the door. That said, I do have anecdotal information, absolutely. We're only seeing 1 or 2 accessory dwelling units a year. Pretty steady, but not many. This will change that. To what degree? 10, 20% overall. Same with middle housing, with critical areas and trees. If we get 5 to 10 single family homes a year, will it increase? Yes. Will it go to 20, 30, 40? No.
But we should know what we need so that we know how to measure it, right?
Yeah, my measuring stick is the 870 adopted growth target for our regional allocation.
Yep, thank you. Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. And my detailed question was about how many meetings we may need to bring the community up to the same speed as us, which is why I asked, and I forgot to answer the original question, which is, am I available? So my apologies for deep dive and forgetting my purpose. I have all Mondays and Thursdays available through June, so I don't seem to have any conflicts pending at this time.
Councilmember Plebo, did you want to add anything?
I don't have any conflicts other than what June 3rd.
And I also don't really have Monday or Thursday conflicts. I would propose, well, first a question for Director Hoffman. Do you know, do any members of the Planning Commission want to attend council in order to present their work product, or will you be essentially presenting it on their behalf?
The way it's set up now, we still have SCJ under contract, but limited funds. I have not talked to them today about their availability. Planning Commission, much like Complan, has not identified that they would come forward and play a role. So essentially, it's me given the time.
Okay.
4
And
or
then
5 weeks is not enough time to really round it out. I would like to involve SCJ at the key meetings because a lot of the amendments are theirs. So questions about what's in there, why this, that, they would be best to answer. They cannot be available to all the meetings. And so primarily the answer is me.
Okay. And then looking at June, the first week of June, we're going to be quite busy conducting interviews for the new interim council member. So I would like to propose either Monday, June 9th or Monday, June 16th for a special meeting where we can get into the weeds and have deliberations. I guess the question is, should it be before or after our June 12th public hearing? I feel like it would be good to have it before. That way the public kind of knows if we are planning any changes from the Planning Commission's version. But I could see either the 9th or the 16th for us to have some deliberations. Because again, the meeting on the 12th, a big part of that meeting will be voting on a new interim council member. So I don't think we'll have a lot of time to have discussions. So that would be my suggestion. And then the third week of June, we don't have the 19th, so it would just be Monday, the 16th would be really the only day. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
No, thank you. And thank you for proposing those dates. And I think June 9th would be great if everybody is willing to put in the work and do the reading by that point. That gives us something like 3 weeks. So I think certainly for me it's doable, but I don't want to speak for all of you. So if I can get a head nod on whether that's like a reasonable amount of time for you to digest what is a fairly lengthy document.
Yeah. June 9th.
Right.
Oops, I'm not muted. I
Let's
vote for
go.
June 9th.
Let's go with the 9th.
And then, sorry, Councilmember Saunders and then Councilmember Riddle.
Oh, I was just going to say, I vote for June 9th.
Okay, Councilmember Riddle.
In the event that we have significant community feedback at the public hearing, would we be interested in holding the 16th as a potential additional to address community concerns? And then canceling it if it's not necessary? What does Deputy Mayor think of that?
I mean, I'm always up for it if you guys are. So yeah, I think absolutely. We are trying to respond to community needs, and as people have noted here, many eyes is better than just our pair of eyes. So let's basically carve out the schedule. It may not be necessary. I want to point that out too. It may turn out that on June 12th. We hardly get any public comments that are trying to propose some other things. So it will, and the thing that I also like about the 16th is it gives the staff enough time that they can respond to our changes, and hopefully by the time we have to actually vote on it, we'll all have agreed on a document.
Okay, Councilmember Good.
Yes. Are we doing adequate outreach to the community so that they understand what our metrics are and what the goals are, so that they clearly understand? I think that, our city is a little bit unique compared to Shoreline and Kenmore, and they may hear more of the big news of those cities than what would apply to ours. So I'm just concerned that we do a proper amount of outreach between the time that we do the necessary meetings so that they are fully informed of what is before us.
Yeah, staff's used every available measure, and I could attest to my tiredness that we've nearly exhausted the opportunities. And the website's been up for quite some time. We always entertain more, but now with 5 weeks to go, it would be a challenge to do anything citywide like a mailer. We've done surveys, open houses, public hearing at Planning Commission. And I think we have a firm grasp, mostly because it's the minimum mandate. And the items like affordable housing tools are in the parking lot for further review.
I'm just suggesting maybe we put it out on Shoreline Area News or some sort of bulletin. So even though we don't have time to do a mailer, we can do a push to our community via email, possibly.
That would be a method. We do media, besides just newspaper of record. I'd be glad to send an email to the Shoreline Area News again.
Deputy Mayor Furutani.
Yeah. And I'm glad that Director Hoffman brought up the parking lot, because the Planning Commission has put in a lot of work on this, and there were many points where they wanted to go further, but they realized they had a limited amount of time. They want to do a good job on the minimum mandates, and so I'm expecting the Planning Commission, and I don't know if one of you wants to back me up on this, but they're going to basically be looking at other amendments over the coming months, and so this isn't the last we're going to hear about this.
Right. And then if I could jump in myself, I think engaging with the community is important. And I think something that'll be very helpful for the community is if we can provide some context to them, which parts of the code changes are required by state law, and which parts of the code changes are things that the Planning Commission is recommending towards achieving affordable housing goals, just so that the community understands kind of the scope of what is being proposed.
At a high level, they're all of that first category as it stands today.
All right, council members, any other thoughts? So it sounds like the consensus is June 9th and then if needed, June 16th. So please keep those on your calendar. I will turn to Administrator Hill and Mayor French. Did either of you have anything you wanted to add? Nope. Any other comments? Deputy Mayor Furutani.
Okay, and thanks for leading the discussion. And I think just to summarize the dates then, so May 22nd, we have our first introduction to it in council. That's this Thursday. And then on June 9th, we have our meeting where we come and talk about as a group at the special meeting, anything that we saw in there that we would like to see changed. And then on June 12th, the Thursday, that same Thursday of our regular business meeting, we have our public hearing. We hear from the public about anything they'd like to see changed. And then potentially on the 16th, which is the following Monday, we have a chance to discuss those changes and make our final recommendations to the staff so they can get the code rewritten in time for our meeting on the I want to say the 26th.
Yes.
Yeah, the 26th for vote for approval.
Okay, and I'm sure we'll be getting notices of the exact dates and times, but that kind of gives you, you can set your calendars in general. All right, so I believe that concludes our discussion items. And so if there are no other items for us to talk about, I will go ahead and call us adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you. Good night.